right. Welcome back into another edition of Jake's Takes. I am your host, Jake Masucci, and today I got on my guy, Asher Smith. Asher, how are we doing, man? The tournament was unbelievable. An absolutely crazy experience. Just for everything. It was flat out insane. So talk to me about your reaction to this tournament, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, doing well, man. Thanks for having me back on. Yeah, March delivered like we said it would. Absolutely electric. Certain teams making runs that I know you and I didn't pick. Others, obviously, like your own, being a Cinderella spoiler. And then, a big year for those top teams that we mentioned. Highlighted a couple of seniors that would make a splash, and they did. So yeah, it's just like needed in the sports world. That March just always is exactly what we want. So it was great.
Exactly. March Madness, we always talk about it. Best time of the year, man. Best time of the year. Um, yeah, I was talking about it with a buddy like beforehand. It's like you get March Madness, then you get the Masters, and then you get the NBA playoffs. So it's just my favorite thing, like in the world, those three things going together. So it was a flat out unbelievable year again. So today we're doing Final Four reaction, and then we're going to talk about a little bit of what to expect from next season. But before we get into the Final Four, I want to get your overall view on the tournament. Okay, so talk to me about like what surprised you. Some of the teams that were just fun to watch.
Yeah, I'd say that surprising would be the ACC was just something that I would not have called just watching their games. Obviously, I mean, we both had Virginia as someone that was overrated in our mind, and they played the first game, and it looked like the entire ACC would go down like that, and then they had all of their teams win their first round games. They had NC State to the Final Four. They had Clemson the Elite Eight. It was two teams that I had losing first round even in my bracket. So the fact that they were able to pull something together after getting beat up by Duke and North Carolina all year was pretty impressive, I thought. In terms of the top teams, obviously, like super sad for Jamal Shed would be my main thing going in. We're going to give props to the top teams probably throughout this podcast, but like I thought he really had a tough luck going down there because Houston was really revving. But obviously it was inevitable, right? Purdue and UConn. So we got to see one of the best matches of all time. Might have went how some people thought, obviously with the pace of play and who ended up winning. But I thought it was pretty awesome that we got to see number one versus number two in my mind in terms of the teams that played the best this year.
Yeah. I mean, like, it really was just a cool tournament throughout the whole thing because, like, especially we looked at it and we were looking at the brackets and we looked at UConn's and we were like, oh my gosh, there's so many teams that are so talented in this bracket. Like, how are they going to get out of this, And then they just flat out dominated, which this UConn team, in my opinion, probably one of the most talented teams I've ever seen in college basketball. Just flat out dominated the whole tournament. And that kind of leads into talking about the Final Four. So the Final Four this year, UConn played Alabama in the late game, and then NC State and Purdue. So talk to me about what you saw out of these two games. Oakland got to see NC State in person, and I talked about a lot like what I saw from NC State and kind of the details of those games. So talk to me about what you saw from those four teams and kind of the runs they went on and your opinion on them.
Yeah, definitely. I can start with the Purdue matchup and then, let you obviously give your thoughts, knowing that you scouted NC State a little harder than I did. But, it was just awesome to see NC State make that run. I actually don't think that a lot of people saw them going by Duke, and you could say that for every single round, but that was just a tough matchup. Like Duke is clearly a team that's going to be around for a while. They have players that came back to be in that moment. They had a coach who had gotten them past his first weekend last year, and now he's looking to go to the Final Four. They just expect a lot, and playing a team that they'd already beaten that year, it was incredible that NC State was able to hold them to what they did and really just outpace them the entire game. Like there was never a doubt that NC State was winning that game. And I would not have called that. I mean, DJ Burns was America's sweetheart this year in the tournament, which I know might pain you to say, but he was just, unbelievable. And I think that he's going to have an awesome career because of this March Madness tournament, which is, what this is all about. Super cool. Got to give their coach credit, obviously, winning not only that many games in a row in the tournament, but in the ACC tournament to end the year, right? They needed to win to get in. And all of a sudden they're in the Final Four. So it was super awesome. I thought the Purdue game went, about as good as it could. They decided not to double Zach Edey, instead played this zone where they could get DJ Burns off of him, make him take a couple shots outside the paint, but you really couldn't stop him. He was averaging 30 no matter what. He was going to get it. Hard part about playing the zone against Purdue is they have shooters, right? You're going to need to match up against those guards, and they didn't really do a good job of that. But they had, the DJs going at it, and they made it a fun game for us. So it was a great way to start the Final Four, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that game was really, really interesting to me, and, I mean, I talked about it a lot on my pod, like, I was just like, with NC State, they were a really, really good team, and, like, looking at the matchups, it was like, okay, our game plan against Burns was to double team them and make the other guys beat them because they don't have much shooting, it's just the truth. They have literally, like, 2 shooters, which is Horn and Taylor, the guy that comes off the bench, and, that's kind of what we did, and they shot the lights out. And O'Connell really killed us. He came in and flat out dominated. Like they have a lot of guys that can really defend on the perimeter. They have that one guy that comes off the bench that was actually a 5-star football player and just comes off the bench and guards you full court and is insane. Like he's insanely athletic. He was fun to watch. But yeah, so we doubled Burns, and then you saw a team like Duke that let him play 1-on-1 and was like, okay, we're not gonna let you pass and because that's going to be your strength. You got to score 30 to win this game. And he scored 30 and they won the game. So like then you're like with Purdue, okay, what are they going to do here? But Purdue has a lot more different kinds of bodies they could throw at them. Sometimes they'd have Edie go at them, and sometimes they'd have that freshman, I think Kaufman was his last name. Yeah. And that made it tough on Burns, and Burns had that early foul, and you're looking at that game, and that completely changed it because then he couldn't be as aggressive. Their game plan was to have him guard Edie, so then he couldn't be as physical with Edie, which really hurt. So I think they just got NC State out of rhythm, and I said on my pod, the only way that NC State was gonna win that game was if Horn went crazy. And Horn played a really good game, but when you have to shoot like 30 times, it makes it really, really tough to win a game like that. And Horn's a great player. He's just not to that like elite status yet. I mean, fantastic player, fantastic scorer, absolutely killed everybody he played against in the tournament. And I mean, it's just an unbelievable run for NC State, but it also goes to show you just how good Purdue was. Like Edie's just an absolute monster. The numbers he put on throughout the whole thing is just sensational. And then Fletcher helped out. Braden Smith had his normal triple double numbers. He turned the ball over a little bit, but that's okay. And Lance Jones really stepped up in that game. So, I mean, looking at it that way, it was just an unbelievable run from NC State, but it was kind of clear that they were gonna, fall off in that one. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I agree. I think that the cool thing about all four teams is that we really got to see the transfer portal shine in a
yeah,
good way. They had pieces that they brought in to fill. I think NC State's entire starting five was on a different team last year, or at least the last 2 years. So,
mhm,
the fact that that was the case, and we got to see, the teams put together 4-game, 5-game runs like that. Like Purdue brought in those pieces to do that, and like you said, so I think NC State just ran out of it. You only need 2 guys to win a game, but you need 8 to finish it, and they just don't have enough to throw at Edie, right? Like Utah State went through 12 big men in that game
yeah,
against them. It's just too tough. So I think that what Purdue did to strengthen themselves was better than most teams. We talked about that. I think that all Final Four teams, like once you get past the first game, you can see why they make it. Like they start cooking, right? Those
yeah,
upset potentials happen, but as soon as Purdue got over the hump, they didn't lose, or they didn't lose a half, I think, in that entire tourney, right? So same
yeah.
with NC State, right? Once they got going, then it was fine. But it's really easy to start out flat, and the team with more depth usually ends up edging it out.
Especially when you play a team like Tennessee. Like I really thought that Purdue Tennessee game almost was going to decide who was playing UConn, like no matter what. I like both those teams went absolutely crazy, but it was clear that like Purdue was able to shut down everybody but connect. And like that really helped. And the Tennessee, I mean, most of those offensive guys didn't really show up in that game to win the game, and like I thought those were probably the two best teams other than UConn, and it would give them, kind of a scare in that final. But UConn, just moving into UConn, talking about the Alabama game, they were just flat out incredible throughout the whole thing. So talk to me about that matchup, UConn Alabama. Alabama actually played them the closest it felt like throughout the whole game. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was just gonna agree with you. I think that honestly, looking back, it was probably game of the tourney, which is
Yeah,
crazy. Obviously, the championship was two best teams, and that was exciting. But what Alabama did is they said we're not going to defensive game plan, we're going to offensive game plan, and it ended up working, right? Like no one can stop UConn defensively. They have 5, maybe 7 players that can take you 1-on-1, and that's just flat hard to guard. But if we look at Alabama, they're like, well, we have 5 guys that can shoot over every single person you throw at us, and they decided that Sears and them were going to keep them in the game. So I thought that was awesome. I thought it was a great way, obviously to go against UConn, but in the end, like as we'll talk about for the UConn Purdue game, it's it's impossible to stop that guard play defensively, offensively, the sets they run. Like you could literally write a book about what Dan Hurley's doing. I'm sure they're going to do it, but it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, I was talking to so part 2 of the podcast, Drew was all in on Kentucky, right? And like an offensive team that could really take them. And like you saw it in that game. Like Alabama was if they're hitting their threes, they're just so tough to guard. And even if you're a great defensive team and a great offensive team, like if you can't sometimes you can't keep up with that, you know? Like and it was clear that Alabama really showed a lot more than I expected them to show, making it to the Final Four in the first place. But they really gave them a great game. And Grant Nelson had that unbelievable dunk. That was incredible in that game. And he really rebounded extremely well. It showed some weaknesses from Klingon because Klingon got into a little foul trouble, and then Nelson was able to really get after it on the glass. So Alabama controlling that glass and hitting their 3-pointers really kept them in the game. And then just UConn's too much, man. The motion in their offense, it's a joy to watch. It really is because they're moving all over the place. The ball is going right, left, right, left. It's going all over the place in order to find the best shot. And then if you can't find the best shot, let's just throw it to our 7-2 guy that has the softest touch, or run a screen and roll with Newton, and who's an amazing passer with Klingon. And then you could also run the Spain and put Cam Spencer as a shooter. So it's just so many things you can do with that. And like UConn just does such a great job, and they're so much fun to watch, which kind of moves into UConn Purdue, which we can talk about a little bit here. So first of all, the matchup, like you said, was just incredible. So talk to me about like your thoughts before the game, you know, what you thought each team would do to attack each other, and then your thoughts kind of after the game.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that we said it like both teams should not lose a game in this tournament, right? Coming in, we saw their matchups. We saw obviously the work they put in after last year, and it was like, okay, these are the two best teams. The one thing they don't want to do is see each other. And that's what we
Yeah.
got, which was, awesome for the viewer experience. For the coaches, would love to hear, what their game plan schemes were, because it seemed like Purdue, who had the same game plan the entire tournament, was going to execute the same thing they did. And to an effect, they did it. Zach Edey had what, 40 points almost, most
Yeah.
dominant center since I'd say Karl Anthony Towns, maybe even, going back a little farther, most dominant center since Greg Oden, which is crazy numbers, but
Yeah.
they were able to run an entire tournament using that 7-4 big man and nothing else. I think they started the championship game with like 6 hook shots in a row. So like they
Yeah.
knew exactly what they were going to do and they were going to stop it. Some people say that's why they got upset past years, but it was also because they strengthened the rest of their team, right? They had rebounders, they had other guys that go back to the basket, they had 3-point shooters. They were going to do their thing. Thought that was a great game plan. The interesting thing about UConn, who obviously was expected to win, but at the same time was going to be a little bit at a disadvantage for the first time ever because their big man was only 7'2". What UConn did was they completely switched their philosophy from Alabama to Purdue, which I thought was, probably the most impressive thing they could do in this tournament. They were like, okay, we have to guard a team that's averaging 100 points a game. What are we going to do? We're going to slow the pace down. We're going to get to Klingon. We're going to get dunks. We're going to take advantage of their defense, right? Then they switch over to Purdue, who you literally can't score on in the paint because they have someone protecting it. And they're like, okay, we're going to win this with our guards. We're going to amp up the defense full court. We're going to take advantage on one-on-one play. We're going to run our sets. And that was probably like the biggest thing that stood out to me was just Dan Hurley's offense being interchangeable between two very different styles of basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing was in this game was like, all right, Zach Edey's gonna do his thing. He's gonna score a lot of points. He's gonna grab those rebounds, and Klingon's gonna have a little bit of trouble like guarding him. But we're gonna play him 1-on-1, and we're gonna make Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith beat us. And we talked about it last year. That was the thing with Purdue. It was making them beat you. But like they're better this year, so it's way harder to do this year and like have them lose early, which is something I overlooked because I thought like a Utah State team would be able to exploit that, but we didn't see it exploited until UConn, and that's because they have guys that are 6'6" and can do that to them. You know, they were pressuring them full court. Cam Spencer was
Yep.
all over the place, grabbing rebounds over everybody, and I love his game. The more and more I watched him, I was like, wow, this guy's incredible. And then Tristan Newton, I've talked about him like so much on this podcast because he's just an unbelievable passer, super athletic, and he was scoring out of his mind in this game. Like really was keeping them in it in the first half because it seemed like Edey was going to get out of control and make it tough. And then in the second half, everybody got going and it just made it a lot easier. And I mean, this UConn team just hands down. I mean, Stephen Castle had that monster game against Alabama. Like, they have so many guys, and it's like so tough to deal with, you know? And I we talked about it preseason and with our way too early rankings and all that. We just weren't sure if they were going to be able to sustain that dominance. And the fact that they did, it's just a testament to Dan Hurley and like what he's made, and that, like, it's just crazy. It's crazy because it doesn't happen in college basketball. So what was your reaction to a repeat in college basketball? Because we haven't seen it since I was young. Like the Florida teams, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, gotta be the hardest thing to do in sports, and people obviously come at me for saying that, but it's absolutely crazy that they were able to do that. I think that they had the perfect balance of transfer portal players, top 15 recruits, returning players, like everyone that was somehow able to buy in and not think that obviously, oh, I'm going to the national championship team. This is about me. This is my time to get to the NBA. It didn't really matter to them, right? They knew that if they played their game, they were going to win every single time, and that's what they did. So it was, obviously really fun to see in person. Didn't really get a great chance to watch them during the regular season. Was focusing on some other teams I thought was going to be good. It was really high in the Big 12. That ended up not turning out right. So like, there's some other things that maybe distracted from UConn, in their repeat run, if you will. It's not like they had the press of a 36-0 team. Just because they do what they do and they win games, right? It's easy to turn them off. They're like, oh yeah, that's UConn. They're going to be a 1 seed in the end of the tournament. They showed us why against Purdue.
Yeah. I mean, it was just an incredible tournament, and UConn deserves all the praise in the world because, like, I mean, I gave a lot of praise to the Chiefs for winning that Super Bowl because it's so hard to. I mean, it's so hard to do. It's so hard to repeat, and it's just incredible. What UConn did, and especially in college basketball. College basketball, you just don't see it. You see it in the NBA, you see it in these other leagues, but like you just don't see it in college basketball. So it definitely needs to be praised because this tournament is so hard to dominate the way they did, especially with all of their wins being over 10 points. Like that's just incredible with the teams that they had to play.
No, I totally agree. I think that people can like classify this year as like a boring year because you had a pretty chalk bracket, right? You had a down year in terms of league competition. You have the quote unquote weakest NBA draft in 20, 25 years, right? Like people could look back and be like, okay, that was pretty, weird, pretty light year. But I think you could also say UConn is one of the top 10 teams, of the past few decades. You could say that Zach Edey is one of the most dominant college players in the last 20 years, right? But you got to give props to the people that are doing it because they made it look easy, right? It's not like it was
Exactly.
given to them. They made it look easy. So I thought that, it was really cool to see it. I think people appreciated it in the moment. We got some great March Madness stuff, but also like it was really awesome to see
Yeah.
those teams play
No,
more
I
than
mean,
just one
that's
game.
the truth. That's the truth. All right, well, we are going to take a little break, and then we're going to get back we're going to do some way too early rankings. So we're going to talk about next year and things you should expect. So we'll be back in a sec.
Hello, hello. This is Giovanni Mosheri. You might have heard me a couple times on Jake's Takes. I am the sports media director of Oakland University's campus radio station, WXOU, and I've been the host for about 2 years of a weekly sports show called The Jomo Show, where we cover all of Oakland University athletics, including a weekly update on scores and highlights, as well as interviews with athletes or those otherwise involved in athletics. You can listen to The Jomo Show live on WXOU Thursdays at 6, or you can tune in to me afterwards on Spotify. It's The Jomo Show.
All right. Welcome back into the show. And before we get to our way too early draft, we are going to talk about some coaching carousel moves because it was flat out crazy. It was just insane. Like, I'm sitting, for some reason, I'm up at 11 o'clock, which I'm never up at 11 o'clock, and I'm just chilling on my phone. And I see Twitter go with an alert that Calipari's talking to Arkansas about a coaching job. And I'm like, this has to be fake. What's going on here? No way this is true. And I see all this talk, and it keeps getting, more people that I rely upon on news are saying that this is happening. I'm like, what is going on here? And then I see the official news, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So this news just shocked me, completely shocked me. So Asher, talk to me about what you think of the news, what you think for both sides, the Kentucky side and the Arkansas. It's just insane news. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy news. I mean, I think I remember when Musselman went to USC, and I was like, oh, it's great move. Arkansas fans are some of the craziest sports fans in the world, right? They're expecting a ton. Going to USC, LA team, now in the Big Ten, like good for him. Like he got out. Like Arkansas is really left holding themselves. Apparently they were playing this whole time because I turn around, they have the hottest coach in college basketball who's supposed to lifetime contract at Kentucky. He's supposed to retire there in the next 10 years. Buyout was like $33 million.
Yeah.
Like just an insane, absolutely insane move. And I'll take the side that it was great for both parties. Obviously it's going to be weird seeing him on the sidelines, right, as
Yeah.
a fan. But in terms of basketball, he's going to a school with a lot of money that is offering him a chance to bring back a basketball team that recruits very well, right? At the
Mhm.
same time, though, the expectations are a lot lower. They're looking
Yeah.
to win the SEC, probably the best conference next year. Right? They're adding Texas and Oklahoma, probably adding some other teams in the future, right? Bringing him to the same atmosphere that he knows without the expectations of a national championship like Kentucky. Those fans, obviously, we know are expecting Final Four bust every single year. He gets to go out, still be one of their winningest coaches, still have that national championship under his belt, and I think it's great for both teams. Kentucky can refocus their money on someone who's a lot better potentially, but I don't know. I'm expecting big things from Arkansas now. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it just threw me off, man, like completely. And like you hear all this news that Calipari's probably coming back, and the Kentucky's like in on him. But like the more and more you look at the news, the more and more it makes sense. And that's because of the expectations were just going to be nuts next year. It's like, all right, you have to make the Final Four or you're fired. And that's ridiculous expectations. And yes, it's Big Blue Nation, and all that. But like that's just insane. And if you're looking at it from Calipari's perspective, it's like, okay, I really like Arkansas. I'm tight with one of these boosters over here that we know each other from way back. Jerry Jones is a part of the booster clan, which really, really helps that aspect. And then you're looking at it like this job isn't going to be open next year. So like if I don't make the Final Four and then I'm stuck looking for a job, then I won't find anything better than this. So I feel like it just made complete sense, and it seemed like his time at Kentucky was bound to come to an end, like, eventually, because, like, with how he, um, like, approached the game, it was like, "Okay, I wanna get these guys to the NBA," and now we're seeing, like, the older teams become more successful in college basketball, and that seemed to just be a little bit of a problem. Like, if you're looking at our matchup with them, like, the reason we beat them was because they were so young. And that's what we talked about on the podcast. That was one of the reasons why I was so excited to play them, because they were young, they would struggle with the zone, and they'd turn the ball over. And those are the tough things to coach out of those guys. And I think Calipari realizes, okay, I don't know if I can do this anymore if I'm not getting the cream of the crop, if I'm not getting like the guys like Cooper Flagg, who we'll talk about in a second, and those guys. I mean, and I think that was just kind of a realization for him. And like, maybe it's just time to try a new way and try a new thing in Arkansas. It's just going to be weird, I think, for every college basketball fan to see him in red. But
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
No, it's definitely going to be weird. I think you nailed it. Like he was getting a little tired of the recruiting aspect. You have to bring in five stars every year, or else you don't have a team, right? Like that's ridiculous. Now you can't even hold them for more than 2 years if they don't go to the NBA because they're going in the transfer portal as soon as you get them for one. So just absolutely insane standards, right? At a team like Kentucky that has to one, reload every year, and two, win 30 games. Like that's just not sustainable. And as great of a career as he made for himself at Kentucky, Calipari had a name before that, right? Like I think what
Yeah.
Arkansas fans are excited about, what college basketball fans can get excited about, is that guy makes the Final Four at every single team he's at, right? He did it at UMass, he did it at Memphis, he did it at Kentucky, he won an Natty at Kentucky, he was in the NBA. He's got everything you need, right? Obviously, 10 years ago is when you want to hire Cal because that's exactly when he was the top name, but he's still the same guy. And what I think is exciting about that is everyone else in his bracket, if you call it, has either retired or said they moved on or expressed like the same reasons for leaving that he did, where it's like, I can't sustain this anymore, right? I can't deal with every single kid's parents. I can't deal with every single other team trying to recruit my players mid-season. I'm out, right? We saw Beeline retire. We saw obviously Coach Kane Boeheim retire after long careers, and then we saw even like Roy Williams and Jay Wright retire it, in times that people thought they probably had a couple more years left, right? So instead of that, we get to see Cal at a different team try to do it again. I think that's really exciting for fans. People are going to enjoy that.
Yeah, no, I think it'll definitely create like a media air in college basketball next year, which will be really cool. Especially like his return to Rupp Arena. It's gonna be insane, flat out insane. So
Gonna be
I'm
insane. We
definitely,
need it.
yeah, no, we definitely need it. We definitely need it. So it's gonna be crazy next year. Let's look at the Kentucky job. Okay, so let's look at some of the names that have been floating around. Talk to me about who you think would make sense, who doesn't make sense, and what you heard and stuff like that.
Yeah, at the time we're recording this, obviously we know a little bit more, but the list is still every single person that is, interested in basketball right now, right? Like there's no one they can't get. There's no one who doesn't want this job. If they call, you're answering, right? So
Mhm.
more interesting to see the people that have said no so far or said yes to their current job, right? I thought that Nate Oates was the perfect hire. He said he wants to come back to Alabama, right? We'll talk about them a little later.
Yep.
They reached out to Billy Donovan with the Bulls. I thought that would have been a perfect hire. He obviously said he wants to stay in the NBA or
Yep.
at least not go to Kentucky for its time back. And I understand it, right? It's somehow more money, but it's also more expectations than an actual NBA job. So again, names like that are people that I thought would make a lot of sense. They obviously said no, they're in great spots. In terms of this job and who I think would be the best, I think Scott Drew is a name that's been floating around that I actually agree with. People might not think his personality matches up with Kentucky, which I understand, but same way with Alabama hiring DeBoer in football. Like I think this guy brings like a calming presence where it's like, hey, I've done this before, right? I've gone national
Yeah.
championship games. I've won national championship games. I bring my system in. I'm bringing in players that are one, going to be 5 stars, and two, going to stay for more than 1 year, right? And that's probably what Kentucky's silently hoping for, even though they're not going to settle for less than the number one class. They want someone who's not only experienced but has a 10-year history of bringing a program from great resources, great basketball history. What are they going to do with it? To national champion. Same thing they did with Cal back in the day. They just want to do that again. I think Scott Drew would make the most sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with almost everything you're saying. Like Nate Oates, I wasn't shocked that he wanted to stay in Alabama. It seemed like he just found a home there. So it really just didn't make sense for him to leave, especially after this year. Like he's definitely built a program there, so it makes complete sense that he would want to stay. Billy Donovan is one that surprised me because I mean, like I'm very locked in on the NBA, and Chicago has sat in the middle of the NBA, just in that play-in
Yeah.
for so long. And like I feel like with Billy Donovan, it's like, all right, this brings you back in the college game. Like there's expectation here, but like you played here in the past. It's a great program. You'll have everything in your toolkit. And yes, I feel like a college job is way harder than an NBA job. Maybe not way harder, but it's harder. And but I feel like at Kentucky, man, like it just would bring his swagger back completely because Chicago has been stuck in mediocrity, and it's not his fault. There's been a lot of things that have gone awry, and that's why he hasn't lost his job there because there has been so much stuff that has gone awry, and they've still figured out ways to win games, and they don't have a defensive center at all. So don't get me started on Chicago Bulls rant, but it's clearly not his fault. So I think he would be a great fit at Kentucky, and like that's the guy I want to see there. Looking at names like Scott Drew and stuff, I just don't want to see him leave Baylor. Because he's built a program at Baylor, and there's so many like powerhouses in the Big 12 now. Like I feel like it would be tough for Baylor to kind of stick around if he leaves, and I guess it would make sense because they kind of had a disappointing year this year, losing in that second round to Clemson. So, I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see who they can get. But it's crazy to see like the names. The first list of names that I saw, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool that Kentucky job is open. But I'm really excited to see what they do. It's going to be exciting no matter what.
Yeah, totally. I think the names that make sense, Scott Drew, even Dana Altman at Oregon, people that, kind of underperformed, but have been like sensational college coaches that could come in, could be a little cheaper, obviously, but like at the same time, their buyout's low. They know how to win. They come in, implement their system, and go great. Some of the more fun names, obviously, tossed around would be national championship coach Dan Hurley, which I heard him getting asked at the press conference if he was staying at UConn, which is absolutely hilarious. People like Bruce Pearl, Brad Underwood was another one. Like there are some definitely names that Kentucky can reach that we're not even thinking of, right? The fact that Arkansas can pull Cal, like there's no one off limits. But I would say that hopefully that they stay within their own, find someone who's got 10, 15 years in them to build something, and makes it like a championship culture again. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do there. All right, let's switch into Michigan. Okay, we wanted to squeeze it in here. Okay, because of course, former Michigan student manager right here. So, Asher, I want to hear your reaction. Okay, how excited are you that Dusty May is coming to Michigan?
5'9". He was number one on my list. Number one on my list. I mean, he was, top name in the country last year, obviously with the Final Four. This year led him to another 20-win season, which was insane to do at FAU, right? In terms of their past basketball success. One thing obviously that makes me very excited now is that he's got one of the best transfer portal classes coming because he had a team at FAU that was pretty stacked and all, had another year of eligibility. So, with John L. Davis hopefully coming to join their center, like things are looking up. I think it's a
Yeah.
great direction. Obviously, sad to see the old regime down, but it was a good hire. I think they knew exactly who they were going after as soon as they let Juwan go, and yeah, you just couldn't be more excited at Michigan. I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be really good for Michigan basketball. It's bringing it back, and I've talked about Michigan basketball before. Like it used to be, that was my team completely. Switched over to the Oakland side. Okay, it's no offense to Michigan basketball. I'll always have a place in my heart, but like I think this is a great hire. I think it's really. I love the way that Dusty made like coaches basketball and how his teams play, and I really think it's going to be a good fit. And you're going into a Big Ten that's going to be interesting. Michigan State's young, like they'll probably be near the top again. We'll see what Illinois can do. Shannon's a senior, right? That was his last year.
Yeah, I mean everyone has another year, but they've got a couple of guys projected in the draft. Same with Purdue, right? We really don't know
Yeah.
what their team's going to look like until July, so it'll be good again. But they're adding 4 more teams. It's kind of wide open, right? Like he can really make himself a name year one. One thing I'll say about Michigan is obviously I understand why the job isn't as desirable as other schools. It's a football school, right? It's got high academic standards, all that, blah blah. They do have one of the best basketball fan bases in terms of football schools that you could ask for, right? They clearly care about it, or else they would have kept, their former coaches around a little longer than they have. They also have, one of the best alumni connections if you're trying to bring in that NIL money, which I know might be a little more, a little less than others in terms of freshmen, but with the guys that you want to stay, they've been known to do a pretty good job. The other thing that I like about May is that he recruited the state of Florida, which, as we know, is top one most years in terms of high school basketball recruits, right? So he can bring in a good base the first couple of years to hopefully, strengthen this team and not have them sit at the bottom, while they're still figuring it out. So good guy. Used to live in Eastern Michigan, or used to live at Eastern Michigan when he was assistant coach there, right? He knows the area. So we're all super excited he's here.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely looking up for Michigan basketball, 100%. And it's going to be, that's another fun one. Like I'm really looking forward to see the Big Ten next year because it's just going to be different, and we'll see. And that kind of leads into looking at next year. So we got our way too early draft. Okay. So
Sounds good.
I'm going to give you the first overall pick. Okay. And we're going to pick 5 teams, maybe 4. We'll see how much time we got. But let's start with 5 teams, and we'll just talk about them, go through what we think of them next year, and who we think are going to be the best teams going into next year. To be honest, I don't have our way too early draft from last year on me, but it would be fun to look over that every once in a while. Maybe the third year we'll look over our past 2 drafts and see how we're doing.
Yeah,
So,
go back and listen to that one.
exactly.
If you haven't listened to it, go back and
listen to that one.
see if we're
that
any
one was
good.
fun. Yeah, no, I mean, they might have been good. They might have been not. I don't know. I don't remember. So let's get into this one. Asher, I'm going to give you the first overall pick. You're on the clock.
Yeah, I got Duke. Duke's number 1.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
obviously it's going to be tough to go against the dynasty in UConn, and we'll mention them later. But it's Duke. That their coach proved that he's not some shadow of Coach K. Right? He's his own person with his own system. The stuff that he was drawing up to get them to the Elite Eight this year was incredible, in my opinion. Right? He convinced 5 stars to come back. He brought in better 5 stars. It was just a great body of work. And look who they're adding. Right? The number 1 player in the last 5-6 years. Right? Cooper Flagg.
Mm-hmm.
All eyes are going to be on him. They can handle it, right? The camera crazies are going to love it. They're, ACC's down, right? People don't want to admit, obviously, because of how the tournament went and everything that, but like all eyes are on the SEC, all eyes on the Big Ten with these, mega conferences. ACC's open, right? It's going to be Carolina and Duke for a while, which is exciting. That's what we want. But I think Duke, in terms of their schedule next year, who they're going to schedule to make themselves better, but also who they're going to pick up wins against, they're going to find themselves in that 1 seed conversation pretty early.
Yeah, no, I'm in 100% agreement. They were number one on my board by far. Cooper Flagg's unbelievable. Like one of the best prospects, probably the best prospect since Zion, I think. And he's just monster. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Duke play. They'll probably bring back a decent amount. I think McCain's definitely going to be a pro.
True.
I think Filipowski might be gone. I'm not positive there. And then like they'll have some solid pieces. I think Tyrese Proctor should come back if he has another year of eligibility because he didn't have the best year. I was expecting way more from him. But they'll have some pieces. They always have great recruiting classes along with Flag. Like they're definitely bringing in more guys. They're the clear favorites out of the ACC. I think. I think it's pretty clear to put them ahead of North Carolina. But North Carolina is going to be up there too. And as we saw from the ACC in this tournament, like you never know. You never know what can happen. But a lot of the other teams though are losing a lot. So I think it's definitely Duke and North Carolina at the top, like you were saying.
Totally agree. Who do you got?
All right, my first pick, I'm gonna go Alabama, man. And I hate doing that because I was so like I had them overrated this year. I was completely wrong about them. All right. Marcus Sears is awesome. He was flat out insane in that Final Four, and he is coming back. That they have so much shooting, man. So much shooting. And I've always loved how they practice because I tell the story because I think it's a great story that they actually practice with a 4-point line and it's 4 spacing. It's so smart too because like they space the floor so well. So then like if you have a drive and a kick, like let's say a guy comes up and like is ready for a contest, then you can pump fake and dribble in and you're still shooting a 3-pointer. That's exactly what you want. It helps with the spacing. It prepares you for the NBA. It's just the truth. That's where they want you. And I think Alabama's just developed a program here, and with a guy like Marcus Sears coming back, like he's just an absolute monster. You saw it in that tournament. In that Final Four game. He started out perfect from the field and was just ridiculous. And they just have so much shooting. They bring in talent every year. Losing Brandon Miller, I just wasn't sure what this team would be, and they came back and were just sensational this year. So I'm not worried about like who they're bringing in or anything like that or who they're losing. I think they're going to bring back just an incredible team, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them next year. What do you think about that pick?
Yep, totally agree. They were number 2 on my list, so it's good that we're in sync. I think I was looking at teams that would bring back a lot of people because obviously, you want the top recruits, you want the top transfer portal, but the teams that won it this year returned for their starters and added a top transfer, right? Like you don't need 9 new pieces, you need 1. And I think Alabama's 1 away. I think they're 1 away. I think Grant Nelson will stay. I think you can convince a lot of them to stay. Their coach coming back, like obviously something's working right there. So they were number 2 as mine as well.
Exactly. All right, number 3. Who do you got? Third pick.
Number 3. This one was tough because I think that a lot of the teams we just don't know like who's exactly coming back. So like the list could change a lot. Obviously, a new coach is moving on. I had Marquette as my third one, which I think that that's tough to pick a team in the Big East when you know that there are some power players coming back. Power programs that are going to be there. You're probably losing Kolick, right? Like why would you choose Marquette? They're not really losing a whole lot else, And this is a team that's been a 2 seed the last 2 years and has underperformed, right? And that lights a fire under someone like Shaka Smart, who has just got to the second weekend for like the second time in his career, right? He's hungry for more. He's building there. Players want to go play there. People, especially grad transfers, want to go play there. They're going to bring back 4 or 5 of their key players, right? Key minutes. That's a big deal, right? And in the Big East, too, is going to see a lot of turnover, going to see a lot of attraction, in the portal because they were the top conference once again. They're going to have a lot of consistency. So I think that if he's able to do the right things in the offseason, retain his coaching staff, right, retain his better players, they're going to be a top team. If they get beat up along the way, like so be it. They're going to be another top 3 seed. I actually like them taking the step without Kolick because it might make them play a little differently, but we'll get into that, right? So stuff like that is what makes me more attracted to a team that like underperformed, right, for the past 2 years. Like Purdue, right, underperforms so that their fans want more, the coaches want more. They're going to go to work. I like Marquette.
Yeah, I mean, those like the Marquettes and the Cradens were always tough for me to kind of like evaluate before the season.
Right.
I kind of like that you picked them this high. I think it's a little high for like where I would put them.
Totally.
But the Marquette always like brings back like a squad. Shaka Smart has like built a system there to maintain success. And I just keep going back to that Big East championship, and I love how they competed without Kolek against UConn. Like it was just a great game. It was
Right.
back and forth, and they really played them tough. Like UConn has trouble in the Big East. Like the Big East has some teams that are just flat out scary. And I got to see Creighton in person in those first
Yeah.
round games when they played Oregon. Like they're really tough. Like both of these teams are just so well coached, and the Big East just does such a great job, which is why I try to highlight it in the podcast, having Jonah on and bring his analysis, because like I
Totally.
thought Xavier was pretty good this year. But like they're just in a stacked conference, and it could get them in the tournament.
Right.
And like we just saw what Seton Hall did in the NIT. Like there's a lot of great Big East teams that were just really successful. And I mean, St. John's was really good this year. Like it's definitely a very tough conference. And I like picking a Big East team that high. I don't really
Yeah.
know what Big East team will end up being there. It'll probably be UConn again, like all of a sudden. But I mean, we'll probably pick them soon. But like I like Marquette. I think they're going to be near the top of the Big East again, and I think it's definitely a good pick there.
Yeah, I think it's all about who comes back, right? Kolek and their center come back. I think they're top team in the Big East, right? UConn's losing a lot. They don't come back, they're probably fighting for it. But I just like the consistency of what they're keeping there and the coaching staff, staying on and everything like that. So that's my number 2. Who do you got in your 2 spot?
Okay. I'm gonna go with Iowa State here. And
I knew it.
like Iowa State's awesome, dude. Like I couldn't quit them throughout the whole tournament. And like I mentioned on the podcast, I was like, I don't like teams that win their tournament. And Iowa State won their tournament, and I found it so hard to pick against them. Just so hard, and it's because of how great of a defensive team they are. And like it's just an identity. Like that doesn't go away, and that's what I love about this coach. I'm not going to even try to say his name right because I can't. But like he's just an excellent coach. He puts them in the right positions. And defensively, they're just so talented, so talented. And this was a young team. They're bringing a lot back. I love the forward that they have off their bench. Another name I can't pronounce, but he's just a 7-footer that can shoot, that can dribble, that can do things, and was just fun to watch. Like he's only going to get better, and they're going to continue to have these guards that can really defend. I think they just make it so tough on people. They're going to make it tough. The Big 12 is going to be stacked again. Kansas is going to be really, really good. I'm seeing them all over these way too early rankings. Houston's going to be really, really good.
Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona coming to the Big 12. Like, it's just going to be crazy in the Big 12 next year. But I think Iowa State, you have to put them in that top tier. And I really like what their coach is doing with them.
Totally agree, man. Yeah, I knew you were going to pick them in that spot. Like I had no doubt. Like you obviously are high in that team, and I think you're totally right. I think that Kansas is getting a lot of praise as they do in the offseason, and Arizona's coming in, and Houston obviously is trying to take revenge for the past couple of years, get back to that Final Four. But Iowa State's doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
They're winning basketball games. They're not apologizing for it. Like they are doing exactly what you want as a basketball fan base, and I think that they're going to only add, right? I think that they're bringing back everyone who meant everything. Like they're only going to add, and that's an exciting spot to be in, right? Not risking losing players is an awesome spot to be in.
Yeah, I mean, and this take only like matters if the coach doesn't leave for Kentucky or anything like that. But I think Iowa State's definitely an exciting team to watch. All right, so before we get to your pick, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be back at you guys in a sec. This episode is brought to you by WXOU. WXOU has done so much for me, and I'm really appreciative for everything they've done. I remember being a freshman walking into their radio station and being like, wow, this is really cool. And their podcast director took me by the hand and showed me the first piece of audio technology I've ever seen. And ever since then, I've been running with it. I absolutely love it. And these guys have really done a lot for me, so I just wanted to shout them out. All right. So we are going to switch into our last 2 picks. So we're just going to do 4 teams. And Asher, it is your pick. So tell me who you got.
Yeah, I think right here I'll take UConn. I think returning all your players, not returning all your players, they're a top 5 team, right? Like you can't leave them out. I'm not going to be here next year when they win it again, leaving them out. But no, I seriously believe in it, right? I think that they're on dynasty watch. Even if it's not next year, it's the next 5 years. They're going to get one more, right? No one can stop their system. The Big East can't stop it. The NCAA tournament certainly cannot, right? So just on coaching alone, you got to put them up there. Talking about the players, obviously, when you play in a national championship system for 2 years, right? You have guys coming off the bench that are ready to go, and that's what we saw the whole tournament. Their starting five was excellent, but when they needed a rest, they had five guys come in that could run the floor against the best players in the country, right? So they're going to bring in top talent again. They're going to lose Castle if that's tough. They're going to lose some grad transfers, right? Cam Spencer came from Rutgers and was one of the best players in that championship. They're probably going to replace him with
Yeah.
someone very similar. We have a guard heavy transfer portal once again, right? Like that's going to be a top destination. They're a school without a true football program, right? They're going to have a lot of NIL money. It's just, everything that they need for a good offseason is there, right? While they're celebrating. So they got a lot of work to do. Obviously, they, geared up to be one of the best teams, college basketball. They're going to have to replace a lot, but I have them as going to be one of my top 10 teams probably the whole year.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. You nailed it completely. Like UConn is UConn, man. Like if we don't draft them, then we don't know what we're talking about. It's just the truth. Like they're just flat out insane, and they're gonna bring back a lot. I mean, a lot's coming back. I think Klinging's coming back. Like it's gonna be something. Like they're
Yeah.
definitely gonna be tough to handle no matter what. We talked about it in that Big East segment, like of Marquette, and then you got UConn, you got Creighton. Like all those teams are just they're so tough. I mean,
Yeah.
they're
They're reloading. Villanova's going to bring back everybody. Like it's going to be a much better conference, and that was probably the best conference in college basketball. So
yeah,
they're going to be a top team.
It's definitely going to be crazy for sure. And like UConn there, if you didn't pick them there, I definitely would have picked them there. Like they got to go that soon, and
Totally.
they really are that team for sure. All right, moving into my pick. I think with this pick, I'm gonna go with Gonzaga.
Wow.
And I really like Gonzaga. I always do because Mark Few just he finds ways to make these teams really talented. This team should not have been a Sweet 16 team. I mean, it's just the truth. Like this was the first year in my life that I saw people not picking Gonzaga. They had them. Oh, McNeese. McNeese is the number one upset team. That like they shoot it well from the three. They're a fantastic offensive team. No way they get past McNeese. They win that game, and then you play Kansas, and it's like, okay, Kansas is a little banged up. I'm not sure here, but I gotta trust the blue blood. They still have Dickinson. They still have all these guys. That's gonna be a tough team to get past. They got past them, and then they're playing Purdue. And if you watch the first half, you think they're gonna win that game. Like they were just proving everybody wrong. And Mark Few is just somebody I don't bet against. If Nemhard comes back, that's flat out scary because he's got the genes. His brother's unbelievable to watch in the Indiana Pacers. Please go watch him. He is great to watch. He's smart with the ball. He does everything right. And Ryan's the same way. He's the same way. Like he does great stuff with the ball. I love watching him play. His numbers were down this year. I expect him to move back up, and I expect him to get better if he were to come back to college. And they just bring in guys that are just athletic. They have so many athletic wings that makes them tough to match up with. And Few's going to continue to bring in those guys and continue to make them scary. So Gonzaga to me is a team to watch out for. They're just flat out scary, 100%.
Yeah. Actually on my list, I didn't have them top five or top six, but they're a team that I agree. I think that kind of like Kentucky, and losing their coach and like being on the hot seat, right? I thought Gonzaga might even be in that same boat where it's like, hey, Mark Few, you're a generational guy. Where are we going with this, right? And the fact that they're sticking with him, right? They're sticking with their guys. They're bringing in good talent, right? They have top 10 recruit this year. Like it's going to be really fun to watch. I think that they're going to be excited. They're going to probably make Big 12 moves in terms of like, playing in that conference soon enough. If not, probably some other power conference is going to get them. So like, they're still going up somehow, even though they've been one of the most dominant win teams the last couple of years, right? I think with their backs to the wall, it's going to be even more exciting. So I totally agree with you. They're bringing all the pieces back. They showed a lot of great things that people weren't really watching during the season, and they're going to be watching this time.
Yeah, no, I'm excited 100%. All right, so for our last pick, we're going to do like a team that we think will raise expectations, kind of like a surprise team. So, Asher, I'm going to let you go first. Okay, talk to me about who you think will kind of shock some people moving into next year.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably go with a couple of the top tournament teams again who are losing people, right? Like Purdue, Tennessee, or even Arizona, right? Like you're losing all Americans. It's going to be tough. But at the same time, like you're bringing back guys with experience. Purdue, I think, has 2 7'4" guys behind ED. Like they're probably going to win the Big Ten again, right? So I leaning that way, but honestly, probably going to go for a long shot. I think last year I picked USC, and we saw how that worked out. So why don't we do it again? Team that I'm most excited for next year is Rutgers because of
Rutgers.
their recruiting
Love it.
class.
Love
Two
it.
top 3 recruits going to Rutgers, first time in history. They have number 1 class for a while, number 2 class, I believe, now after Flag went to Duke. Things are looking up, right? They even knew before last year started that this was going to be the team. You know, they've been talking
Yeah.
about this team since they were freshmen in high school. So the fact that both of them are still committed there, they clearly put all their pieces together in terms of NIL and building around them, right? And getting the coaches that they wanted. It's going to be super exciting to watch. Will it work, right? Obviously, USC did not work out with a couple top 5 recruits in there, but I think that in the Big Ten, you know, they kind of prepared themselves a little bit differently than they would in LA. You know, like Rutgers is obviously building a basketball program there. They haven't really focused on other stuff. They centered their NIL and their transfer portal like efforts towards it. I think it's gonna be super exciting. Steve Eichel's an awesome coach, right? Like, don't get it wrong.
Yeah.
He wins games. He's one of the only coaches to have a winning record against Purdue the past couple of years, I'm pretty sure, right? Like, beat him twice as a 1 seed. He's a great coach. He obviously is there for a reason. But those 2 players, right, Bailey and what is his name?
Harper,
RJ.
right?
Yeah, now Harper. Thank you. His
Yeah.
right. Yeah, Dylan Harper. Thank you.
Yeah.
Those guys are going to be absolutely excellent. So I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were my second name when I wrote down, like, they're sensational, you know, like, you have to take them seriously because of that recruiting class, you know, like, Harper's unbelievable, and, you know, like, they're just sensational because, like, Rutgers always brings in these guys that are, like, they're athletic wings, you know, they have those guys that can do that, and, they'll be a switchable team there. I'm interested to see what their big will look like next year. I never really like remember like a menacing big at Rutgers, so we'll see what happens there. The guard play is just going to be ridiculous, and it's going to be fun to watch because of the talent level that they have. Might be similar to like a Kentucky team that we saw this year. Maybe not too much defense from them, but a lot of great offense. So, you know, like I'm excited to see that from Rutgers. They're definitely an exciting team, and they'll put the Big Ten on notice for sure. I mean, I'm excited to see it for sure. I think it's a great pick there. All right, I am actually gonna pick Xavier in this scenario. Okay, I am going with them. They had a young team last year. They just did. It's the truth. And I remember playing them at the beginning of the year, and we're looking at them, and like we're like, okay, this team's very similar to us, but they're just young, you know, and their guard. I don't know his name, but it's like number 11. He was their
Yeah.
best player throughout the whole year. He just had a sensational year and really did a great job. Like against the Big East opponents, he kept them winning. He kept them doing things, and he really made it difficult for anyone to really stop him. And he'll be coming back, I think. And they always bring in guys that are like really that can really help their performance, and they're gonna have a lot more pressure on them next year. It's just the truth. Like with Sean Miller coming in there, it's like, okay, we got to win game, you know. And not making the tournament this year was kind of a step in the wrong direction. Where it's like, all right, let's wake up a little bit. We gotta play better than this. And with the Big East that is continuing to get better, it's going to be important for them to take that step. So I think they're going to be able to take that step, especially if they're able to retain all that they had this year, and then one more year under their belt, one more year of disappointment will help them move on and help them get better from it. So I think Xavier is a team to watch, and I'm excited to see them.
Totally. I mean, that's a down year for them is still a winning record, right? They've
Yeah.
won the longest streaks of winning records, and they brought back their guy, right? They have their coach. Just looked up. I think Olivari is one of the guards that went crazy last year. And no, I totally agree. Like they are one of the names that we were surprised not to see, which is a good sign for their fans. Like they're coming back. They're going to be really good. They obviously have now like a couple bigger names with them, which might bring them back to that 1 seed Xavier, those days. And they have some unfinished business, man. I think a lot of people picked them to go far last couple of years, and to see them not even in the field was like, what's going on here? So they have their work cut out for them, right? Big East is a little better than it was last time they were regearing, but it's also wide open, right? Like you really never know who's going to step up. Seton Hall kind of came out of nowhere for me this year, right, with a new coach. I think that Xavier could definitely do the same.
Exactly. Well, that concludes the Way Too Early draft. Asher, thank you so much for another college basketball season. Our second college basketball season is officially over, which is crazy to say because I remember like it was yesterday I was doing the preview, So
Yes,
thank you
sir.
so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate
Of course, man. No, excited to see the guests you get on this off season, man. Enjoy.
it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Well, that is going to wrap up the podcast for today. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Peace.